If you think your neighborhood is creepy, then just wait until you hear about this isolated farm in rural Germany that was home to some truly disturbing activity in 1922. The murder mystery has never been solved, and it's left people baffled for almost 100 years. This is the story of the most evil crime in German history, the Hinterkaifeck murders. Germany in the early 1920s was a mess. It had recently emerged victorious from World War I, but the country was still reeling from its effects. Food shortages were widespread, the economy was in sharp decline, and many Germans were looking for an escape from the grim reality they were living in. But few could have imagined a more gruesome escape than what happened at the isolated farm known as Hinterkaifeck. It was here that 6 members of the Gruber family met their demise, in one of the most terrifying ways imaginable. On March 31, 1922, something evil crept across the snow-covered fields of Bavaria and stalked into the Gruber farmhouse. Today, we're going to retrace the steps of the killer and uncover the facts, theories, and cover-ups surrounding this sinister event. On February 1922, Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, and their 6 children were enjoying the rare luxury of a warm winter day on their isolated farm in the village of Hinterkaifeck, which translates to Bach Hinter, the corner. While Andreas was working on some repairs around the farmhouse, his daughter Victoria was busy feeding pigs in the sty. The family was well known throughout the community as hard workers who took pride in their land. Their farm was large, prosperous, and seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. The setting of the crime is important because the location of the Gruber farm would later become key evidence in the case. The farm was really far out in the countryside. In fact, the nearest neighbor was almost half a mile away, and there was another house closer than that for another 2 kilometers. The next closest village was even further away. So, if you wanted to visit or receive visitors, you basically had to walk. Because of the distance between neighbors, it wasn't unusual for days to go by without any visitors. And that's exactly how it was on the afternoon of February, when the Gruber family first noticed strange footprints in the snow leading up to their front door. Andreas went out to investigate, and he found a set of tracks left by a pair of hobnailed boots. He followed them to where they disappeared around back behind the barn. He looked around back there and didn't see anything suspicious before heading back inside. But those footprints were only the beginning. In the following days, Andreas kept finding more and more tracks in the snow. He checked all around the property and found them coming and going in various spots, especially near the pigsty. Concerned by these mysterious footprints, Andreas decided to install a surveillance system. He placed 2 chairs near the windows that overlooked the area behind the farmhouse, so he could keep an eye on things while he worked inside. On the night of March 31, 1922, Andreas and his sons awoke in the middle of the night and went to check the chairs. They saw a shadow in the darkness behind the farm. Whoever it was, he was moving around restlessly. Then, he disappeared. Maybe it was just an animal. They shrugged it off and went back to bed. In the morning, though, the boys told their father what they had seen. Andreas was concerned enough that he decided to sit by the window and observe the area himself. He sat there for hours, but nobody came out from behind the barn. Just as he was getting ready to give up and go inside, he saw a man emerge from behind the haystack. The man wore a blue jacket, brown trousers, and a black hat pulled low over his face. He walked with a limp and seemed to be dragging his feet. As Andreas watched, the stranger began to approach the house. Andreas screamed and ran to get his shotgun. As he looked out the window, he saw the stranger turn around and head away from the house. Andreas grabbed his chair and ran outside to check for footprints in the soft earth, but the ground had been recently rained on, and there were none. The stranger had apparently come and gone without leaving a trace. Andreas called his neighbors to tell them what had happened, but they could unhelp because they were busy harvesting their crops and would be free until the end of April. For now, Andreas and his sons decided to take turns staying awake at night to watch for the intruder, but none of them saw the killer again. Then, on April 4th, the police finally showed up to question the family. Apparently, Andreas had neglected to report the incident right away and hadn't realized until it was too late that the officer who had been sent to investigate was already on his way to the next village to look for the missing person. As it turned out, a woman had been reported missing from the nearby town of Schwabenhausen. Her name was Maria Baumgartner, and she'd been gone for almost a week. Her family had searched everywhere for her, and had even put up reward posters throughout the countryside. But when they arrived at the farm, they discovered the worst possible news. All 6 members of the Gruber family were dead. The police found the bodies in the bedrooms. Each member of the family had been hit over the head with a blunt object. But they didn't stop there. The killer had also stabbed each victim multiple times. The post-mortem examination revealed that the blows to the head had killed them instantly. The stab wounds were inflicted after that. To add to the grotesqueness of the scene, the murderer had mutilated the corpses. He had cut off one of Victoria's breasts and removed the internal organs from several of the victims. He even boiled the internal organs, seasoned them with salt and pepper, and arranged them on a plate. But why? What sick pleasure did he derive from this carnage? The officers combed through the house and the yard for clues. They searched high and low but couldn't find a weapon. The obvious place to look first was the murder weapon. Without it, the case was going nowhere. But it was nowhere to be found. The only thing the police could recover from the crime scene were a couple of empty beer bottles and some muddy handprints. And then there were the bodies of the parents. They had both been buried in the same coffin because they had been engaged to be married. But when the officers tried to exhume their bodies to conduct autopsies, they found that someone had taken the caskets and buried them deeper. Who did this, and why? The initial assumption was that Andreas had murdered his own family and then killed himself. This theory was bolstered by the fact that Andreas had been having an affair and his wife had found out about it. His son, Josefina, had been planning to leave the family farm and start a new life in the city, and the discovery of a love letter written by his daughter Victoria suggested that she had been romantically active as well. Investigators theorized that Andreas had snapped and murdered his entire family in a fit of rage before taking his own life. But this theory fell apart when the autopsies came back. Andreas and his sons had died from blows to the head, but they weren't dealt from any weapon that the police could identify. It meant that whatever had killed them had not been brought to the farm from elsewhere. It was something that had come from within. This detail may have been lost on the investigators at the time, but it was noted by a young medical student named Joseph M. Osterreicher. For now, the lack of evidence was stymieing the investigation. There were no witnesses, no murder weapon, and no sign of forced entry. Even the footprints in the snow had been erased by rain. The police had nothing to go on except a hunch. They focused on relatives and former employees of the Gruber family. One of the top suspects was a handyman named Lorenz Schulcher. He had been hired to repair the roof on the Gruber farmhouse, but he had quit shortly after the incident with the shadow. The police questioned him, and he admitted that he had been at the farm on the night of March, but he said he had only come to retrieve a toolbox that he'd left behind. He insisted that he hadn't seen anyone else there. The police let him go, but they kept searching for clues. Eventually, they received a call from a local innkeeper who said that she had served a mysterious man a large amount of brandy on the night of March 31st. She said that he'd been wearing a blue jacket and had paid for the drink with a $5 bill. When the officers asked her if she could recognize him in a lineup, she said that she could. With a lead like this, the police felt confident that they had caught their man. They brought him in, and she positively identified him. He was arrested and taken to jail, but the evidence against him was circumstantial at best. He had been seen in the area. He had paid for a large quantity of brandy, but there was no proof that he had actually committed the murders. Still, this was as good as they were gonna get. So the man was taken to trial and convicted of the murders. After the verdict was read, the judge asked him if he had anything to say in his defense. "I am innocent," he said. "I did not commit these crimes." After the trial, the man was led out of the courtroom by 2 burly guards. A crowd had gathered and they were baying for his blood. Some wanted revenge. Others were just curious. They surged forward, but the guards held him back. Suddenly, the prisoner broke free and ran towards the crowd. The guards gave chase, but it was too late. The mob descended on the man, beating him until he was unconscious. He was taken to a hospital, but he never regained consciousness. Even though he had been declared innocent, the public had convicted him and taken justice into their own hands. In the aftermath of the trial, the police uncovered new evidence that showed that the prisoner had, in fact, been innocent. The authorities attempted to cover it up, but the damage was done. People were furious that an innocent man had been beaten to death, and all the while, the real killer walked free. The investigation into the Hinterkaifeck murders remains open to this day. Hundreds of thousands of people have visited the site of the crime in the hopes of discovering new evidence or uncovering the identity of the killer. The story of the Hinterkaifeck murders is a chilling reminder of the evil that can lurk in the shadows, and it shows us the lengths to which a human being will go to protect their own. If you believe that you could solve this case, please tell us your theory in the comments below. For more on unsolved mysteries, stay tuned.